The only thing standing in the way of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers clinching the NFC South on Sunday nights is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We will tell you why on this crossover Thursday episode of the Locked On Bucs and Saints podcast right now.
See these receipts? Keeping these receipts.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Bucs and Saints fans, to this week's crossover Thursday episode, and thank you for making your favorite Locked On podcast your first listen every day. I am David Harrison, one of the hosts of the Locked On Bucs podcast, on Twitter at dharrison82, and I'm spending this Thursday with my favorite crossover host on the network, also my boss on the Locked On Podcast Network. Not that that has any influence on what I just said. Host of the Locked On Saints podcast, Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola. Ross, I mean, truly, you know this because I've said it to you in atmospheres that don't provide me any sort of benefit. Truly one of my favorite 2 weeks of the year, and then 3 if we're lucky and we get a Saints Bucs matchup in the playoffs. The fans go crazy. Fan Twitter has already started. I've already been engaging with a couple of Saints fans who are on the better side of things. You've seen some of that traffic. How have you been? First of all, how you doing? And how pumped are you for this divisional matchup?
Good, man. I'm doing really well. Glad to be able to be here to dive into all of this with you as always. You know, these are some of my favorite crossovers as well, and I love this time of year. Saints and Bucs season doesn't get any better than this. I'm looking forward to this matchup big time. They're always the weird ones at Ray J too, so I'm excited for this one more in particular.
Absolutely, of course, Saints fans. I don't even know what, like, Saints Nation is. It's Who Dat Nation, right? Nation. Yeah. There you go. Who Dat Nation. I'm going to get added for that, for not remembering that.
There you go. So
Who Dat Nation,
dug your
of
ditch,
course,
my friend.
Yeah, of course. Firmly claims that this is not a rivalry game. The Buccaneers are not the Saints' rivals. However, promptly on Monday, I started seeing a lot of Saints chatter about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But let's chat about something else. Let's chat about storylines. Ross, what is going down in NOLA that Bucs fans need to know about the most?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest storyline going down in New Orleans right now is still centering around health and what the New Orleans Saints can do now that the team is getting a little bit healthier. The last time that these two teams played, it was a vastly different team, right? I mean, you had Jameis Winston at quarterback. You had Adam Trautman was still out there, had probably his best game up against Tampa. And both of those players, unfortunately, injured in that game. Adam Trautman was designated to return on injured reserve on Wednesday, so there's a chance that he could be back for this one. But, of course, Jameis Winston, his season is over. The Saints went to Trevor Siemian for the rest of that game. This game, they're going to start and hopefully finish with Taysom Hill at quarterback. So that's been the big sort of scuttlebutt so far around the New Orleans Saints, if you will, has been how this team is performing with Taysom Hill as opposed to Trevor Siemian. And, of course, the big return of Alvin Kamara last week certainly made its waves as well.
Absolutely. And I think for the Buccaneers, you mentioned health. I think that's got to be the storyline for really every team in December, especially teams looking for playoff seeding. And the New Orleans Saints, thanks to a kind of a top-heavy NFC this year, right? The 6 and 7 teams and all that, they're all still very much in contention for a playoff spot. And the team holding the 7th spot right now, the Washington football team, may not be holding it very much longer thanks to COVID and some other things. But I think for the Buccaneers, outside of health, I think the biggest storyline has to be, can the Buccaneers finally put down Big Brother? And let's just put it out there. This is going to make some Saints fans happy with what I'm about to say, and probably make some Bucs fans upset with what I'm about to say. But bottom line is, I mean, the New Orleans Saints have been Big Brother to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for some time now, and I'm not even talking total series record or anything like that. But for one, the New Orleans Saints are winners of the 6 of the last 7 matchups. 10 of the last 15 have won the last 6 straight regular season contests. And in this divisional matchup, Ross, only one team has ever swept the other 3 straight seasons. That was New Orleans Saints a little while ago. If they win this weekend, it'll be the New Orleans Saints again for the second time in this series history. Yeah, so, I mean, swept them in 19, swept them in 20, and then of course won the Week 8 regular season matchup against the Bucs, 36-27. But here's some interesting things, and these are all anecdotal, right? Obviously, have nothing to do really with the game and with what head coach Kevin James is going to do with his Saints squad on the field. The New Orleans Saints haven't lost in Tampa since New Year's Eve of 2017. I thought that was very interesting. But that win in December 31st of 2017 is the only time in the last 3 matchups that New Orleans has actually won in Tampa in the month of December. So Again, anecdotal, right, and all that, but still very good. So a little bit of good and bad, right, from both sides of the conversation. So I might get some hate from both sides of the fan base here, and that's fine. Last time we met, Ross, and I did dive into the YouTube comments over the Locked On Saints YouTube page. So for Saints fans commenting about how much they love my analysis, I did read those comments, and I will be reading them again. And a lot of those centered around my criticism of Jameis Winston at the time. Obviously got injured. Nobody is celebrating that. So I want to apologize, Saints fans, Ross, for criticizing Jameis Winston as much as I did. I know it struck a nerve, and I promise that this time around I'm not going to criticize the New Orleans Saints quarterback situation. But let's be honest. Taysom Hill as the number one quarterback, the main primary, not the best option. I'm not criticizing, just pointing out facts.
No, of course.
On a scale of 1 to 10, though, 1 being average Taysom Hill, so it's 1 on the bad scale, and 10 being average Taysom Hill on the 10 scale. So basically on a scale of 1 to 10, Taysom Hill to Taysom Hill, how bad is it that Taysom Hill is your starting quarterback?
Here's the way that I would look at it. I think that based upon what the options are that are available, which are a rookie that's ever played in the NFL and who's been inactive all season, and there's probably a reason for that, and Trevor Siemian, who lost 4 straight games, and who did come in and have a nice game in relief of Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston was performing well against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, then he got injured, and then Trevor Siemian went out there and kind of, thrashed the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, which was a bit of a surprise to us all. But I think that when you look at what Taysom Hill brings in comparison to the other 2 options, he's your best option without a doubt, because he gives you an extra dynamic. He gives you an extra dimension in his ability to run. And we saw Tampa really struggle with that with Josh Allen last week. And certainly that's something that, like, if we're noticing it, then certainly the Saints coaching staff is noticing it. And so that they'll very likely try to attack. So I guess I would go in terms of 1 Taysom Hill to 10 Taysom Hill. I'll take 10 Taysom Hill in that situation because of the fact that in terms of what's available to you and Jameis Winston no longer being an option, he's really your best option that you can put on the field right now.
Right. Better than Simeon, definitely better than Ian Book. You don't want to throw Ian Book out there in this situation against this team for his first.
Yeah, for sure.
Unless you're a Notre Dame fan, nobody wants to see that.
Speaking of Taysom Hill, Taysom had a nice game up against the New York Jets, but it was really a day led by Alvin Kamara. And of course, both of those guys have the ability to set up the New Orleans Saints for a little bit of an upset in Tampa. We're going to talk about that matchup and more matchups to keep an eye out on as we continue this crossover edition. David Harrison, Locked On Bucs, myself, Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints, as we continue on with this crossover. But before we get to that, I want to tell you about our friends over at Stat Hero. Listen, David, I don't know about you, but I kind of fall off on the season-long fantasy football thing.
Yeah.
I kind of figure around week 8 or so if I'm really going to be in contention or not, and then I kind of fall out. So what I really like is weekly fantasy football, and I like exactly what it is that Stat Hero has set up, because they are a one-of-a-kind setup when it comes to daily fantasy football and daily fantasy platforms, because you can actually select the lineup that you're going to choose to go up against and build your lineup to contend with that. For instance, right now you can go in and you can select one of these really special ones that they do to where you pick like 3 quarterbacks, or you pick by the position, basically. Mm-hmm. And from that, you can end up picking like 3 QB only lineup. Like right now they have Matt Stafford, Tom Brady, as well as Jimmy Garoppolo. So you can build a lineup of 3 quarterbacks set to take on that specific lineup, which I think is a lot of fun. And it makes everything just a little bit more fun where you can rotate a bunch of stuff like that. And you know what you're going up against, as opposed to some of those other daily fantasy deals where everything's kind of invisible. There's no transparency. You're kind of just going up against stat sheet heroes. So with that being the case, I really, really stress that you should check out Stat Hero for all of your daily fantasy needs, because they are a ton of fun. And you can sign up for free right now by heading over to stathero.com/lockedon and use the promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, so you can get a 100% deposit match on your first deposit. That is stathero.com/lockedon with promo code LOCKEDON for that 100% match. Once again, stathero.com/lockedon, promo code LOCKEDON. Terms and conditions apply.
Segment 2 now here on Crossover Thursday. Bucs and Saints getting ready to match up this weekend. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers trying to clinch the NFC South Division, and the New Orleans Saints try to make sure they don't do it on their watch. Thank you for making your favorite Locked On podcast show your first listen or watch if you're on YouTube every single day. Of course, we're free. We're available on all platforms. Ross Jackson and David Harrison back now to talk key matchups, Ross. And for the Buccaneers, we talked a lot about Taysom Hill. Mm-hmm. Yes, I cracked a joke about Taysom Hill. I'm sorry. It's my nature. It's all in fun. Do with it as
we're having a good time. We're having a good time.
And then, of course, Alvin Kamara, right? The easily one of the best running backs in the NFL, if he's not the best running back in the NFL when he's healthy. And that's all. And of course, that has been part of the problem this year for the New Orleans Saints offense. But he's healthy, right? He should be in this game. So what I'm looking for from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense going against Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara is stop these two or contain these two as organically as possible. The more that Todd Bowles, the Buccaneers defensive coordinator,
everything's about Tom Brady to you guys.
The more Tom has to come into the box and line up over the nose.
Yeah, please put Tom Brady on defense.
No, we're not doing that. The more that Todd Bowles has to bring anybody in the box, whether it be Antoine Winfield Jr. or a backup safety if Jordan Whitehead doesn't get to play in this one, which he was back at practice, but we'll see how that calf injury really holds up during the week. The more that Todd Bowles has to bring up to stop Taysom Hill or to stop Alvin Kamara out of the secondary, the more likely it is that Taysom Hill, look, Bucs fans are going to say, oh, you got lucky or whatever and all these things, but Taysom Hill finds an avenue or finds a slot. And listen, some of these wide receivers, even though they haven't had the greatest season or production, for the Saints this year, things can happen, right? Any given Sunday and all those things. What I found interesting, Ross, is that Taysom Hill in his career against the Buccaneers, because I feel like there's been much more Taysom Hill in Buccaneers games than what apparently there actually has been. In his career against the Buccaneers, 4 for 4 for 104 yards. Now, don't get me wrong, 104 yards on 4 passes is pretty good, but 4 for 4, like I had to check. I was using Pro Football Reference. I checked that number like 5 different times. Like, there's no way Taysom Hill only has 4 pass attempts against the Buccaneers. But I mean, here we stand, and I think that is my first key matchup I'm looking at in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes a ton of sense. I mean, even from the New Orleans Saints side, to highlight that same matchup, because you're right. If you end up getting to a point where you're having to dedicate some of these additional players around and run support and things like that, then it gives Sean Payton the opportunity to be able to scheme something up to specifically attack that. And Sean Payton, just to help support your point here, Sean Payton mentioned on Wednesday when in his conversation with media that he feels like the Saints can have a good passing day against Tampa Bay based upon what they do. Based upon what they do defensively, because they're a heavy zone team, play a lot of cover 3, cover 2 quarters, those types of deep coverages. And so for New Orleans, they're really good at scheming against zone. And now if you're starting to pull players out of that, or you're forcing that team to play something it doesn't play a ton, which would be in this case man coverage, even though that used to really be kind of the identity of Tampa. Right. This point, you're forcing them to do something they'd be uncomfortable with, and then all of a sudden you get receivers running away from defenders, and in man-to-man you get defenders turning their backs to Taysom Hill, which would be a good opportunity for Taysom and the Saints offense to pick up some yards on the ground that way too. So there's a way for them to be able to attack both of these things. But in order for them to be able to attack all of those things and find a way to keep it comfortable, it means that they have to get the run game going. But they can't get the run game going if Tampa's scoring a ton of points over on the other side. You look at Tampa right now, they are the team that has been run against the least in the NFL. They've also allowed the 3rd fewest rushing yardage, but they're allowing over 4 yards per carry. They're 21st in the NFL when it comes to yards per carry. So the Saints have to be able to run the ball here. And on a per carry basis, Tampa's not the strongest against the run. However, you can't run against them very much because you're usually chasing them. They've scored 30 points in every home game so far this season. And so with all of that, in order for the Saints to keep that limited, you're going to be relying on the defense to shut down some of what the passing game is going to be for the Tampa Bay Bucs. You're pretty confident if you're a Saints fan watching this game in terms of run defense for New Orleans. You've been pretty confident about that. But in the passing game, and we get back to the big matchup, Marshawn Lattimore, Mike Evans, we get it again. And so I think that ends up setting the tone, that matchup, for what the defense does as a whole in the passing game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're 100% right in there. And I like really kind of what you mentioned about playing zone versus man coverage. I think a lot of times fans and people who watch the game for just the love of watching the game kind of get confused sometimes. Like, man, those receivers don't match up against our secondary. Why are you playing so much zone? And I think a lot of times people forget how much a mobile quarterback and a versatile running back out of the backfield can really impact how you play defense against the pass, even in the deeper part of the secondaries. Like, you don't want Antoine Winfield Jr. running with his back towards the line of scrimmage, covering a deep receiver in man coverage when Taysom Hill is trying to scramble out of the pocket, or Alvin Kamara is catching a dump pass. So again, those things all kind of, that third level of defense is impacted by what's happening behind the line of scrimmage for an offense like the New Orleans Saints. So I like how you pointed that out, because that's exactly something that Sean Payton obviously is going to look to do. And we flip that over now to the Buccaneers side of things and the running game there and the usage of Leonard Fournette. And I've kind of switched up the way I talk about this and stopped saying running game and tried to go more to running back usage. Sure. So I think when you look at the stats, right, the Buccaneers, not one of the better running games in the NFL. I think they ranked 25th coming into the week in total running, like 21 or 91 yards or something like that rushing yards per game, something like that in the NFL. Not very good. But then when you look at Leonard Fournette, he's coming off of 3 straight games where he's had over 100 or over 92 yards of offensive contributions. You have to look at what the running back, and Saints fans and you obviously covering Alvin Kamara know this all too well. You can't just look at the rushing stats and say, oh, well, this team doesn't do anything with the running game, because as soon as you think your team can back off the line of scrimmage a little bit, play a little bit of a shell, play some umbrella coverage, and keep the offense in front of them, Leonard Fournette's going to rip off 80 receiving yards on your defense. So you're going to go, hey, what happened? I thought their running back wasn't very good. Leonard Fournette has been very effective against the Saints defense, against Saints rush defense, and against those linebackers. Leonard Fournette has to continue being effective. I think last time these two teams played, we saw emotion really get the best of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Leonard Fournette was a part of that situation. I think Leonard has to come into this game more focused, ready to be, I don't know what you want to call him, division clinching Lenny. It doesn't really have the same ring to it.
It doesn't have the same as like playoff Lenny,
But I think it's a better title to carry. And I think of Leonard Fournette, as much as Tom Brady is a cerebral part of this game, I think if Leonard Fournette comes in with his mindset right, executing through the catch, executing on his run after catch, and everything that he can get from the Saints defense, that gives the Buccaneers offense the best chance they could have at doing exactly what you just said, put points on the board early. It's easy to say, well, you need to score more, like we're Matt Millen, on NBC Sports. You need to score more points than your opponent. But when you score early, that's kind of the key factor. Your scoring early is going to be huge. And if the Buccaneers can do that, I think what happened against the Buffalo Bills last weekend will actually help them this weekend. Definitely not come out in the second half sleeping against the Saints.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, a big part of that is going to be the Saints making tackles at the catch point. If they're going to go and continue to play, I mean, they've played heavily in zone, and the teams that Tampa has either lost to or hasn't scored 30 points against have played heavily zone over on the defensive side, with the exception of the Patriots game. But that's, the best defensive coach in the NFL in Bill Belichick.
He's all right. He's
So like, you kind of just let that be what it is.
He's no Kevin James.
He's no Kevin James, though. You know what I'm saying?
He might be like a Ryan Reynolds. You know what I mean?
But for the Saints, I mean, like a big part of it is going to be like if they're going to play that heavy zone, then they have to not allow the yards after catch, and so making tackles at the catch point is going to be huge. The last one that I'll reference here, and I'll kind of go through this quickly, is just going to be Tampa Bay's defensive line up against the Saints offensive line. Right now, Ryan Ramczyk did not participate in practice on Wednesday. The hope was maybe to get him back before this game. That's not a great start to that. So hopefully he's able to get back out on the practice field at some point. There was a couple of weeks ago to where Teron Armstead didn't participate all week, but then was questionable going into the game. So it's possible still that Ryan Ramczyk could come in and be limited or full for the next couple of days. So you're going to be paying attention to that on both sides for Saints fans and Bucs fans. And I think that matchup is going to be huge, because in order for Taysom Hill to really be able to do anything in the passing game, they've really condensed it down to within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage in that last game against New York. You're going to want to maybe expand it a little bit in this one and then try to get some yards after catching players in stride, but you're going to need time in order for all of that to happen. So the Saints offensive line is going to have to hold up both in the passing game to create that and in the run game in order to be able to generate those opportunities that they can get with Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill and maybe Mark Ingram if he gets back.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, no backup offensive tackle wants to go up against a guy like Ndamukong Suh, Shaquille Barrett, Jason Pierre-Paul trying to get after Taysom Hill of all people. So yeah, good. It would be very important for the Saints to get Ryan Ramczyk back. And any football purist should want the Saints at their best, because leave no excuses and all those things and all that. So of course, in this matchup, the Buccaneers are a hard 10.5 point favorite. Ross and I may not be so comfortable with those odds. We're going to talk about that. And we're definitely not as comfortable with those odds as we are in our socks, which might sound weird, but our socks are from Stance, an apparel company providing super soft, entirely unique clothing items that are fun to wear. And they just launched a new line of active apparel, perfect for your holiday gifting behaviors. I own some of their socks, and I'll say I love the unique and licensed designs and the feel of the socks themselves are also next level. Founded in 2009, Stance Apparel represents a radical reinvention of socks, underwear, and active apparel, because everything you wear should be a direct extension of who you are and how you feel. I was actually wearing a pair of Stance socks the first time I got to meet the great Ross Jackson. We were in Mobile, Alabama at the 2021 Senior Bowl. I noticed that Ross was wearing some, I call them funny socks. That's just what I call them. I too wear funny socks since I retired from the Army. It's like my way of recapturing my identity. So of course I had to show them off, and Stance did me proud on that day. Stance believes that the perfect fit matters more than fitting in, that those who feel good do good. Go see for yourself. Register for an account at stance.com and get 15% off your first purchase. Use the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout to apply. Enjoy the color and comfort of a life less ordinary with Stance. Those odds I just mentioned brought to you, as well as this show brought to you in part by BetOnline.ag, who has you covered all season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as we get towards the NFL playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all your sports action this season. So head over to that updated website, either on your desktop device or your mobile device. Sign up today and get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit just by using the promo code Locked On. BetOnline loves you. They love us. You listen to this show, you get 50% on your welcome bonus just by using that promo code. Whether you're looking for basketball action, football, hockey, boxing, UFC, or your favorite Vegas casino games, I like blackjack. Don't wait. Take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2021 before they disappear. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. Wrapping up this crossover Thursday episode, Ross Jackson and David Harrison, Locked On Saints, Locked On Bucs. Find Ross at Ross Jackson Nola. Find me at D Harrison 82. Find both of our shows on any audio platform and, of course, on YouTube as well. We thank you for joining us. We mentioned before the last break, the betting odds here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in favor of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that is, by 10.5 points. Ross, you've already put money on this line, and you put money on this line when it was at 11. And I have a feeling more people put money on that line when it was at 11, which is why it's now at 10.5.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, I went ahead and jumped on that one quick. You don't see many of those, 10 plus point odds in the NFL. It's hard to beat a team by multiple scores in the NFL. And so especially a division opponent. So I definitely jumped on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I haven't put money on that line yet. I usually go straight money line. I like to make my picks just straight up. I like to try to just simplify things. You know what I mean? That's just the way I like to do things. But I will tell you right now, I will not recommend to any Bucs fan to be so brazen to take that line. I'm not even saying it couldn't necessarily happen. And, I think when you look on paper, these two teams, Taysom Hill doesn't match up to a Tom Brady, and the defenses don't match. And I got all those things, but it's the Saints, it's the Bucs, it's the divisional matchup.
They're always weird, man.
Yeah, you can't take these things for granted. But the over-under on this thing, Ross, is 46.5 points. So if it's 23.5 to 23, then the Bucs and Saints will eclipse that line. How do you feel about that line in comparison to the 10.5 point spread for the Bucs?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because you don't think of this game as one that's going to be either that low scoring for Tampa or that high scoring for New Orleans, depending upon which side of the aisle you're on, I suppose, between these two teams. And so I think that that's something that maybe stands out to different people for different reasons, but I think that it's probably right around where it should be. I mean, that's the type of game that I'm expecting to see here. I think this is going to be close more than anything else. So I know that the line says that it's going to be wide, but the idea of it being 23, 23 and a half, 23, 24, that type of situation, I could see the Saints defense being able to create that for themselves and the Saints offense being able to find some ways to be able to put some points on the board, even if they come late.
Yeah, absolutely. And you I'm looking at the Buccaneers game, the weekly release that they like to send out. And the New Orleans Saints are scoring 23.4 points per week. The Buccaneers are scoring 31.5. So that certainly hints to taking the over and all that. But then you look at the defense side of the ball, the Saints are allowing less than 22 points a game. The Bucs are allowing less than 23 points per game. Mm-hmm. So if it's a defensive matchup, and again, some of those weird things that happen, a lot of times those weird things that happen are one team or the other giving away possessions. And when you give away possessions, you don't tend to score as much. I don't know that I would take the over on that. I think I would probably just leave that line alone. But certainly some things to think about there. So Ross, let's get into how each team can win, because both these teams have a chance to win. As much as you would want a 10-3 team to come in and say there's no chance a 6-7 team on the outside looking into the playoff matchup in mid-December can top this team. But we know how this works. And again, we've referenced it a couple of times, and obviously the Saints have been the bigger brother here in this divisional matchup. So what do the Saints have to do? Absolutely have to, no question, without a doubt, have to do in order to beat the Buccaneers this weekend.
Yeah, look, I think the Saints would like to hold off Tampa as much as they can, not only for winning this game, but hey, Tampa, looking to win the NFC South for the first time in a while. The Saints have 7 division titles. I believe Tampa's only got 3. Is that right? 3? Yeah, it's 3. I just wanted to make you say it too. But when it comes down to what the Saints need to do to make that happen, or at least extend the process a bit for Tampa before they eventually win the division this season. If they want to do that, they're going to have to be able to produce over on the offensive side, and that's going to be a big part of this. Can you produce the Alvin Kamara? Can you produce the Taysom Hill? Sure, but are you also going to be able to move the ball through the air? So I think that the Saints have the tools. The Saints have what they need to be able to pull off this upset, but it's all going to come down to execution. Sean Payton not at practice with the team voluntarily on Wednesday because he had a cold. He's COVID negative, but you don't want to risk things and stuff like that. So he was being safe. And so I think that is certainly something to keep an eye out on in terms of how that impacts the installation of this offensive game plan. So if they're able to get that sort of where it needs to be, then I think that they can move the ball through the air. They'll certainly be able to move the ball on the ground, I do believe, because of the extended sort of dynamic that comes with Taysom Hill outside of a traditional run game. And then, as you mentioned, the things that they do that sort of expand the run game to the short passing game. And so I think with all of that, they should be able to move the ball, but can they get into the end zone? When you look at what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have given up in zone, high passer ratings, high yardage, high completion percentage, but only 2 touchdowns so far this season, which is pretty outstanding. And so the Saints have to not only get to a point to where they are moving the ball, but they also need to be able to get the ball into the end zone. So you're going to have to force them into red zone possessions, into red zone defense, where teams generally shift to man coverage, and then you get them to start turning their backs and all of that in the passing game, and then you get to take advantage of all that. So I think that's a big key for them over on the offensive side, is that offensive efficiency and leading that to points so that there's actual value there as well, apropos a conversation we had at an earlier time. And then when it comes down to the defensive side for the Saints, the big thing is going to be, you're not going to be able to confuse Tom Brady. He's seen everything, right? But the coverage has to hold up long enough for the pass rush to be able to get home, or the pass rush has to be able to get home early enough to take him off of the spot before he's able to make any type of decisive action when it comes to passing and coverage. So I think that becomes a big part of it, is that symbiotic relationship between coverage and the pass rush. That has to be spot on, and the Saints have to generate turnovers. Look for CJ Gardner-Johnson, though, to be the guy. If they decide to blitz, if they decide to bring extra pressure, he's going to be a guy that they're going to send screaming off the line of scrimmage every now and then.
Absolutely. I looked up how many times the Buccaneers won the NFC South title. I was like, 3 seems even for the Buccaneers, 3 seemed a little too, yeah, it was 3, man. It's one of those things you block out of your memory when you cover this team.
You might be able to count them on Jason Pierre-Paul's fingers.
Oh, no. If Bucs fans don't hit you in the comments, the way the Saints fans hit me in the comments for going after Jameis, if Bucs fans don't retaliate, I'm going to be very disappointed.
Sorry. That was so rude.
I'm going to be very, but you know what though? He laughs about it. So if he laughs about
does.
it,
That's what made me feel okay. Say, like, I sat here, I deliberated for a second, but he cracks jokes about it. So let's have fun.
Yeah, you have to be able to laugh at yourself. So that's good. That's good. So here's my key to victory, right? And again, this is going to sound very arrogant, and it sounded arrogant in the cold open, and it was by design, and I get all that, right? But let's be honest here. And you know what? There's a Saints fan that I actually follow on Twitter, who basically said this is kind of a lose-lose for Buccaneers fans, and she's actually kind of right.
Shout out to Kristen.
Yeah, there you go, Chris. If the Buccaneers win, it's like you beat the Saints with Taysom Hill, no Michael Thomas, all these problems and injuries that they've been having, maybe no Ryan Ramczyk, right? That's the New Orleans Saints that you beat. So, round of applause, take your victory lap. Congratulations. If you don't, buddy. Right. Oh, buddy. And honestly, if you don't beat them by at least, 7 points even, like, this is a 3-point game. I mean, that victory lap might be a limping victory lap. So it's a very interesting thing. But what that speaks to, though, right, is that the Buccaneers really have to avoid beating themselves. And honestly, I'm looking at Tom Brady, which is weird because we've seen this matchup go through with Drew Brees really leading the way as far as quarterbacks are concerned. I mean, through the Josh Freeman, Jameis Winston years and all that stuff, it's been Drew Brees. And I can't really remember a time outside of the divisional matchup, right, that the Buccaneers obviously won. That's like the first time Drew Brees really was kind of a hindrance in a Buccaneers Saints game that I remember completely. And obviously at the end of his career and all that stuff. But Tom Brady was kind of a hindrance. Now, the 11 penalties obviously didn't help, especially the roughing the quarterback, penalties, the horse collar, and all that stuff. Which, by the way, guys, Devin White, not a dirty player.
Not a dirty player.
It was an unfortunate play. You know what I mean? But Devin White's not a dirty player.
Yeah, I agree.
So outside the penalties, which obviously you want to clean up, you can't have 11 penalties and expect to win a divisional game. The turnovers. Tom Brady had 3 giveaways in that game. The fumble, the 2 interceptions, and miscommunications happen, all that stuff. Got it. But Tom Brady, you can't look at your quarterback and say you're the single point of failure for our team either, but you also can't be the torpedo for the team. You know what I mean? Right. Especially in a situation like this. So I look for Tom Brady to come in with more resolve. And unlike some of the younger players on the Buccaneers roster, Tom Brady's history says that when he gets frustrated or has a get right game, a get back game, he usually does it, and he does it pretty well.
Yeah. I'm waiting on it. No, I mean, it's true. It's true. Like Tom Brady has to be the one, right? Because you've got
Yeah.
a 61.9% completion percentage in his 4 games against the Saints since he joined the Bucs. That's not up to Tom Brady's standard, right? 8 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, sacked 10 times. They drop his adjusted net yards per attempt by 2 yards when the Saints defense gets their hands on Tom Brady. And so and that includes the playoff win, by the way. And so it's one of those things to where he has to be sort of the standard bearer, if you will, for Tampa. But if the Saints are able to rope him into some mistakes, or at least take advantage of the mistakes that are made, which is something that the Saints couldn't do a couple weeks ago against Buffalo, for instance, then that's where they have the ability to be able to, come up and be a bit of a surprise this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the overall numbers, the Saints are one of the lower teams in the NFL in sacking the opposing quarterback. But I don't know, man. When you watch Saints play the Buccaneers, you think that number would be a lot different. Maybe the Saints just need to put like a Buccaneers face on every single game.
Yeah, just make them wear Bucs jerseys every time, every opponent that you play.
Man. And even, I mean, because they stand up, even when they're not very good, I mean, they still stand up against this team. So we'll see how it goes. Of course, thank you to you, Ross, of course, for joining me, for dropping all that knowledge on the Saints and dropping some knowledge on the Buccaneers, too. I mean, you're a very well-read NFL analyst for a reason. Thanks to everybody out there, whether you're listening to audio or watching on YouTube, for joining us, making your favorite Locked On podcast your first listen or your first watch every day. Of course, come back tomorrow. Ross will have another breakdown, one more look at this contest before we hit the weekend. James, my co-host, and I over at Locked On Bucs will also be back, and we'll be giving our final predictions and making our score predictions. So if you want to come back and see if we do take that 10.5-point spread, you can do that. Now that you're done with this episode, make your second listen to Locked On Bets podcast, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, and expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms, just like Locked On Saints, just like Locked On Bucs. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another, and thank you for joining us on Crossover Thursday at the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.